He's considered as the weakest hunter in the world, but after almost dying in a dungeon, he gains the unique ability to level up, which allows him to become the strongest. 10 years earlier, mysterious gates started appearing all over the world, releasing countless monsters, and they were immune to conventional weapons, so humanity struggled against them. But a group of humans awakened special powers, allowing them to defeat the monsters, and they became known as the Hunters. They're given rankings based on their abilities, and we learn that once their powers awaken, it's impossible for them to level up, so the only way for them to get stronger is to upgrade their equipment. We see a hunter named Kim, as a man named Park approaches him, revealing that his wife is pregnant, so he needs to make money by raiding the dungeon. They notice a boy named Jin Woo approaching, and everyone greets him, as Park wonders if he's someone important. But we learn that he's only a E rank hunter, and he's considered as the weakest in the world, because he was almost killed while trying to clear the easiest dungeon. A girl named Jue approaches him, wondering what happened to his face, so he explains that he got injured while reading a E rank dungeon, because there was no healer in their party, saying his companions were so strong that they didn't need one. Jue thinks they're selfish, but he blames himself for being weak, saying he's used to being treated as a burden. The leader Songchi calls them for a meeting, and everyone is glad to work with him, because he's known as a capable hunter. That they're about to enter the gate, as Kim tells Jinwoo to be careful, thinking he might get injured again. We learn that he's using a generic knife as his weapon, because that's all he can afford, but he's determined to succeed, and he enters the gate. We meet the chairman Gun, as he reveals that hunters make profit by selling essence stones, which can be obtained by defeating monsters, and they're considered as valuable resources, because they can be used to craft powerful equipment. He adds that mana crystals can also be obtained in the dungeon, and they serve the same purpose, but they're not as important as the stones. The government plans to use the stones and crystals as a new power source, because they're incredibly efficient, and they don't pollute the atmosphere. We return to Jinwoo, as he obtains his first essence stone, but a goblin attacks him, so he tries to fight back, but his knife shatters, and he ends up getting stabbed. Park kills the goblin, and Jui helps Jinwoo, who watches as their companions defeat the monsters. They're able to defeat the dungeon boss, and everyone celebrates, but Jui wonders why Jinwoo is still a hunter, saying she's worried about him, because he always gets injured. They collect the loot, but they appear to be disappointed, thinking it's not enough, but a hunter calls everyone, showing them a tunnel, as they realize that it's a double dungeon. They know that they will find more loot inside, but Songchi reveals that they can't explore it, because they need to wait for orders from the Hunters Association. But Kim suggests breaking the rules, so that they can collect the loot. Songchi thinks it's too risky, saying they should take a vote, but half of them oppose the idea, including Jui. Jinwoo is the only one that hasn't voted, and he's going to break the tie, so he realizes that his decision is going to affect the outcome. He considers that he could end up dying, but he thinks about his current situation, knowing his father is missing, and his mother is in the hospital. His sister can't help him, because she's still a student, so it's up to him to provide for her, knowing he needs the money to make ends meet, so he decides to enter the tunnel. Meanwhile, the officials are testing the powers of the new hunters to determine their rankings. We meet the guild master of the hunter guild Choi, as he orders the officials to send offers to promising newbies, because they need more hunters in the guild. We see thieves stealing a bag, and they're about to escape, but a girl gets in the way, retrieving the bag, and causing them to crash. She returns it to the owner, and everyone recognizes her as the S-rank hunter Chaheen. But she doesn't like getting the public's attention, so she escapes from the scene. Back in the dungeon, the hunters explore the tunnel, as Jui questions Jinwoo's decision, reminding him that he almost died. He knows that she saved his life, and she tells him to show his gratitude by having dinner with her, causing him to become flustered. At that moment, they see a door, thinking the boss must be inside, but as they enter it, they realize that it's filled with statues, and Jinwoo sees one of them, realizing that it's bigger than the others. As everyone wonders why there are no monsters, they see an ancient tablet, which mentions the commandments of the temple, and Songchi reads it, revealing that it's telling them to worship and praise God, and prove their faith to him, or they won't be able to leave the room alive. But Jui notes that the huge statue appears to be watching them, and the door suddenly closes, causing everyone to panic. A hunter tries to leave, saying they shouldn't have entered the tunnel, but a statue attacks him, killing him in an instant, and everyone falls into despair, wondering how they're supposed to escape. Jinwoo thinks that the statues are too strong to be in a D-rank dungeon, and he looks at the huge statue, realizing that it's watching them. He recalls how he always has a brush with death during his raids, because he can't keep up with the other hunters. But he never gave up, and he learned to compensate for his weakness. By observing everything in detail, he can tell that they're in trouble, so he tells everyone to take cover, as the statue fires an energy beam, destroying everything in its path. Everyone realizes that their lives are in danger, and Songchi tells everyone not to move, because it could trigger another attack. He approaches Jinwoo, wondering how he was able to sense the danger. He explains that it was just a gut feeling, but he realizes that Songchi lost his arm, and he tells Jinwoo to help him stop the bleeding, so Jinwoo covers him with bandages, as he mentions that he was planning to ask for Jui's help, but she always freaks out when she experiences pressure, and this explains why she only joins easy raids. Despite being a B rank healer, Songchi explains that he's been to B rank dungeons, but he's never seen a monster as powerful as the statue, thinking it belongs to an S rank dungeon. He recalls the commandments written on the tablet, and Jinwoo thinks that the huge statue is God. Songchi knows that they no match for it, so they need to find a way to escape, but a hunter mentions that he doesn't want to die, and he charges forward with incredible speed, but the statue attacks him, destroying him in an instant. Jinwoo realizes that it can kill them if it wanted to, wondering why it isn't attacking them. He recalls the writing on the tablet, asking Songchi about it, so he mentions that the first commandment is to worship God. Jinwoo thinks that the dungeon has its own rules, and he stands up, as Songchi tries to stop him, thinking he could get himself killed. But Songchi realizes that he's determined to survive, and the statue of God prepares to attack him, but he bows his head, as he notes that it spared his life, so he tells everyone to prostrate themselves, saying it won't attack them if they keep their heads low. They follow his instructions, and the statue's eyes deactivate, but it suddenly starts smiling. So everyone becomes worried, but Park notes that it isn't doing anything, and everyone thinks they're safe, but it suddenly starts moving, walking towards them, as they start to panic. Jinwoo reminds them that the second commandment is to praise God, and a man approaches the statue, claiming he knows what to do. He starts reciting a prayer, but it smiles at him. As Jinwoo realizes that his plan isn't working, he gets crushed to death, and everyone starts running away. As it chases after them, Park thinks about his family, knowing they're waiting for him to return, but he approaches the statue, and it starts moving, slicing him in half. Jinwoo thinks about the second commandment, realizing that the statues with weapons are killing his companions, and he sees statues with instruments, thinking they need to be activated. So he tells everyone to approach them. They follow his instructions, and the statues start playing the instruments, causing them to feel relieved, because their lives have been spared. Jinwoo approaches a statue with Jui, but it doesn't activate, and he realizes that it won't work if there are two people close to it, so he tells Jui to stay there, and he runs to activate the last one, but the statue of God starts pursuing him. It's about to crush him to death, and he manages to avoid it, but he gets blown away, activating another statue by accident. It attacks him, smashing the ground, and Jui thinks he's dead, but we see him crawling to the last one, refusing to give up, as the statue of God continues to pursue him. It stomps on him, but the last statue starts singing, and we see that he was able to activate it, so the statue of God spares him, returning to its throne, as he realizes that they have completed the second commandment. Jui approached him, but she realizes that he lost his leg. So she tries to heal him, but she ends up reaching her limits. Everyone realizes that their companions are dead, and Kim blames Songchi for everything, because he's the leader of the group. Their companions think Kim is being unfair, because he suggested breaking the rules, and they start blaming each other, but Songchi takes responsibility, because he was the one who made the final call. An altar suddenly appears, as Jinwoo explains that the third commandment is to prove their faith to God, thinking they need to perform a human sacrifice to survive. Kim tells Songchi to offer his life, because he's the leader of the group, and he agrees to this. So he approaches the altar, but a fire suddenly appears, so everyone becomes confused, and Jinwoo tells them to help him reach the altar, because he wants to examine it. As they approach it, more flames appear, and Jinwoo wonders if anyone will arrive to rescue them, but Songchi explains that the gate is about to fully open, so nobody will be able to save them. We learn that a gate remains inactive for 7 days after it appears, but after that period, monsters will be able to enter the world, in what's known as a dungeon break. So hunters are sent into the gate to prevent it from happening, by defeating the dungeon boss, and Jinwoo realizes that if they fail, the statue of God will be able to enter their world, so they need to clear the dungeon at all costs. He advises everyone to approach the altar, and more flames appear, as the altar activates, causing a ring of blue flames to surround it. The door opens, as everyone wonders if they can leave, but the statues start moving. As a blue flame disappears, everyone panics, but Jinwoo notes that the statues stop when he looks at them. And he tells everyone to keep their eyes open, so that the statues won't be able to move. It appears to be working, but one of them panics, and she starts running away, causing a red flame to disappear. She manages to leave the room, and everyone wonders what's happening. Because the commandment is to prove their faith, Jinwoo thinks it's a trap, but another one runs away, so he warns the others that they will have blind spots if more people leave. He thinks the blue flames serve as the timer, and the goal is to survive until they disappear, but Kim knows he isn't sure, because he has no evidence to support his theory. Kim thanks him for helping them survive, but he mentions that he has a family waiting for him, and he decides to run away. Jinwoo realizes that they can't stop all of the statues, and Songchi tells Jui to escape with Jinwoo, but her legs stop moving, because she has already spent all of her energy. So Jinwoo tells Songchi to escape with her, saying he won't be able to run away, because he only has one leg, and he gives her an essence stone, telling her to use it to buy dinner. She doesn't want to leave him, but Songchi knocks her out, and carries her away. Jinwoo is the only one left, knowing he doesn't stand a chance, but he takes a sword, planning to fight until his last breath, but the statues attack him, blowing him away, and he ends up losing an arm. He endures a brutal beatdown, and he lands on the altar, as a statue prepares to strike him down. He notes that he doesn't want to die, so he starts crying, but the timer expires. As he receives a system message, asking him if he wants to become a player, he wakes up in a hospital, realizing that his body has been completely healed. He wonders if it was just a dream, but the manager of the Hunter Association surveillance team, Jin Chul, enters his room. Jin Chul explains that he was unconscious for the past 3 days, and he wonders what happened to Jui and Songchi. Jin Chul reveals that they survived, but Songchi lost his arm, so he might be forced to retire as a hunter, and Jui is suffering from trauma, so she needs psychiatric care before she can join another raid. He reveals that the White Tiger Guild rushed to the dungeon, because they were alerted by the survivors, but they never saw the statues, and Jinwoo was found lying on the ground. Everyone finds this strange, but they believe that the survivors are telling the truth, because the remains of the other hunters were found on the scene. Jin Chul thinks that E-ranked hunter could never survive the incident, so he believes that Jinwoo unlocked a new level of power through a second awakening. He pulls out a gadget, explaining that it will measure Jinwoo's magic, and he becomes excited, thinking he has become stronger, but as he touches it, we see that his score is 10, which is considered abysmal, because even the weakest hunters get a score of 70. So Jin Chul explains that they were mistaken, and they leave the room, thinking he's as weak as a civilian. Jinwoo is disappointed with the result, but he wonders why they didn't inquire about the screen, because he can see it floating in his room. He wonders if he's the only one who can see it, and at that moment, his sister Gina arrives, revealing that she was worried about him. She tells him that she will quit school, and get a job, so that he can stop being a hunter, because he always ends up in the hospital. He apologizes for making her worried, and he inquires about the screen, but she becomes confused, because she can't see it. He asks her how she checks her messages in video games, and she tells him that he just needs to open the message box. So he mentions the message box, and the system recognizes his command, informing him that he has a daily quest. He thinks about how he has become a player, and Gina decides to let him rest, as he reads his notifications, realizing that the system is designed to assist him, but he will receive a penalty if he fails to comply. He accepts the daily quest, and the system gives him a simple workout routine, warning him that he will receive a penalty if he fails. But Jinwoo thinks it's impossible to complete it, because he's still in the hospital, so he decides to take a nap. Meanwhile, Jin Chul reports to Gun, informing him that Jinwoo didn't undergo a second awakening. Gun mentions that the case is full of mysteries, thinking there's still much they need to learn about Dungeon, so they decide to label it as a spatial case, which will require further evaluation. Choi orders Shaheen to become the instructor in a B-rank raid, saying it will serve as practical training for the new recruits. She thinks she isn't fit for the role, but he tells her that she just needs to fight, and everyone will learn from her example. Choi reveals that the Hunters Guild is one of the largest in the country, but they're nothing compared to the best guilds in the world. He knows that a hunter's rank can't be changed, but he thinks they can improve by working on their combat abilities. Jinwoo is sleeping on his bed, but the timer for the quest expires, and the system informs him that he has failed his quest. so the ground starts shaking, causing him to wake up, and he finds himself in the middle of the desert, wondering if he's dreaming, but he encounters a giant centipede, as the system tells him to survive for 4 hours. So he panics, and he starts running away, as the monster chases after him. But more centipedes appear, and he eventually becomes exhausted. He's about to get eaten, but the timer expires, so he returns to the hospital, as the system informs him that he has completed the penalty quest, but he ends up collapsing, and the nurses enter his room, wondering what happened to him. We cut to Jui, as she's invited to join a D-rank raid, but she declines, because she still hasn't recovered. She learns that Jinwoo is in the hospital, so she decides to visit him, but she hears the nurses complaining about his behavior, thinking he's insane, because he just recovered, but he never stops training. Jinwoo takes a break, and we learn that every time he completes a daily quest, his body fully recovers, and he gains ability points, which he can use to increase his stats. We learn that he has an inventory screen, and he can learn skills, but he thinks his situation is weird, because he feels like he's playing a video game. He returns to his room, where he reveals that he gets a random loot box. When he completes a daily quest, he opens it, causing a key to appear. As the system mentions that he can use it to access an instance dungeon in a subway, he becomes confused, because he doesn't know what an instant dungeon is, but he thinks the key will lead him to an event, which can help him get stronger. Jinwoo visits his mother in the hospital, and in a flashback from 4 years ago, his mother suddenly collapses, so they take her to the doctor. He explains that she's suffering from a rare condition known as the eternal sleep disease, which came into existence when the gates appeared. It's caused by continual exposure to mana, but it's incurable, so they decide to put her on life support. Jinwoo needs money to make ends meet, so he starts working at a construction site, but he suddenly awakens his powers, and he becomes qualified to work as a hunter. He becomes excited, knowing his life is about to change, but he realizes that he's so weak, that he can't even defeat a goblin, and the other hunters look down on him, seeing him as a burden. Back in the present, Jinwoo continues his training, and he increases his strength. He heads to the subway, and he takes his key, using it to unlock the instance dungeon. He decides to enter it, thinking he can run away if it gets too dangerous, but the exit suddenly closes, as the system informs him that the only way to escape the dungeon is to defeat the boss, or use a teleportation stone. But he realizes he's in trouble, because he isn't sure if he can survive on his own. Jinwoo decides to explore the dungeon, and 3 goblins suddenly appear. He struggles to keep up with their movements, and he falls to the ground, as a goblin tries to stab him, but he dodges, and he launches a counterattack, killing the goblin in 1 hit. The others continue to attack him, but he easily defeats them, as he notes that he has become stronger. But a wolf suddenly appears, and it charges at him, shattering his knife. He realizes that it's stronger than the goblins, and his legs start trembling. As he realizes that he's afraid, the wolf charges in, and it manages to scratch him, as he notes that he is no healer, so he's going to die if he suffers a fatal injury. He evades the wolf's attacks, as he notices that his body feels lighter than usual, and he manages to overcome his fear. He punches with all his might, knocking the wolf down, and he realizes that he was able to hurt it, because he focused on improving his strength. But the wolf recovers, and it lunges at him, so he tries to stop it with his fists, but he realizes that his attacks are working, so he starts running away, thinking he doesn't stand a chance, because he has no weapon. But at that moment, he recalls that he saw something in his inventory, so he opens it, and he takes a magic sword, as the wolf lunges at him, but he attacks it, slicing it in half. He wonders why he has the sword in his inventory, because he knows that it belongs to Kim, and it's too expensive for him to afford, but he decides not to think about it, and he notes that his wounds have healed. But 2 more wolves appear, as he realizes that his sword is stuck in the ground. So Jinwoo starts to panic, but as the wolves approach him, he manages to lift it, and he takes a swing, but the wolf is able to catch it, so he kicks it, causing it to weaken its grip, and he slices its head off. Seeing this, the other wolf decides to retreat, and as he rests, he realizes that he has reached level 2. He notes that he never leveled up by completing quests, so he realizes that actual combat allows him to gain experience. He notices that all of his stats have increased, thinking it's more efficient to get stronger by leveling up, because he acquires 5 points with each level, while the daily quests only give him 3 points. But Jinwoo realizes that he just defeated 5 monsters, thinking he shouldn't get carried away, and he checks for magic gems, but he finds an item instead. The system tells him that he found a shop, and he tries to buy something, but he realizes that he can't. Because his level is too low, he decides to sell the item, allowing him to earn 20 gold, but he wonders how much it's worth in cash, thinking it isn't much, because he appears to be in an E-rank dungeon. He wonders how he can clear the dungeon, because he doesn't know where to find the teleportation stone, and he thinks he isn't strong enough to defeat the boss, but he thinks he might stand a chance if he continues to level up, and he encounters a pack of wolves, but he isn't afraid of them. He charges in, swinging his blade, and killing them as they approach him. He ends up getting surrounded, but he isn't bothered, and he slaughters all of them, allowing him to level up. He realizes that his sword is about to break, but he knows that weapons are expendable, and he's glad that the fight is over. He checks his inventory, and he realizes that he has already acquired the teleportation stone, but he decides to stay in the dungeon, because he wants to defeat the monsters to get stronger, thinking they will disappear if he teleports away. Jinwoo heads deeper into the dungeon. He senses the presence of the boss, and he isn't sure if he can defeat it, but he decides to fight it anyways. He reaches a swamp, and he sees a creature charging at him with incredible speed. He tries to block, but he gets knocked back, and he realizes that his sword is broken. A huge serpent appears, as Jinwoo notes that its name is Orange, so it has the same level as him, and he realizes that its body is covered in scales, so his sword is useless against it. It tries to attack him, and he manages to dodge, but he wonders how he can defeat it. It starts pursuing him, and he struggles to avoid its attacks, but it hits him with its tail, blowing him away. A train is about to crash into him, so he dashes away, and he barely manages to avoid it. He thinks he still isn't strong enough, wondering how hard he has to work to escape his life of constant ridicule. He continues to struggle against the serpent, as he recalls that he's considered as the weakest hunter in the world, thinking the weak are always powerless against the strong. So he's determined to become stronger. He charges at the serpent, evading its attack, and plunging his sword into its scales. It tries to attack him, but he avoids it, and he leaps into the air, as the serpent tries to eat him, but he suddenly disappears, and the serpent realizes that he's clinging to its body. Jinwoo uses his strength to crush its scales, and it appears to be in pain, so it smashes him against a pillar, but he doesn't let go, and he presses down on the serpent's neck with all his might, causing it to bleed. As he continues to tighten his grip, the serpent runs out of blood, and it crashes to the ground, as the system informs Jinwoo that he has defeated the boss. He receives a powerful dagger as a reward, along with a vial of the serpent's venom, thinking its effects are terrifying, because it permanently reduces strength to increase defense. With the boss defeated, the dungeon returns to its original state, and Jinwoo leaves the subway. Jinwoo notes that the city is in ruins, and the soldier tells him that there was a dungeon break, but all the monsters have been dealt with, except for the boss. He senses a powerful presence, and we see a huge golem fighting a group of hunters. As the civilians watch them from a distance, the hunters struggle against the golem, because its defense is ridiculous, so even their most powerful attacks aren't working. Jinwoo arrives, and he notes that they're weak, because most of them are only E-ranked. He realizes that Jui is with them, and she tries to cast a spell, but she recalls what happened in the dungeon, so she loses her composure. Jinwoo realizes that she still hasn't gotten over the trauma, and he decides to help them, knowing they're fighting against a D-rank boss, which is weaker than the one he just defeated. The hunters are about to get overwhelmed, but Jinwoo launches his sword with incredible strength, and it hits the golem, creating an opening for the other hunters, who use the opportunity to take it out. One of them wonders how they were able to defeat it, because their attacks weren't working, and he sees the sword on the ground, so he inquires about it. A soldier points to Jinwoo, but he's nowhere to be found, and we see that he has already left the scene, because he wasn't expecting his attack to have such an impact. Back in the hospital, Jinwoo continues his workout routine, and a nurse enters his room, but she's surprised to see that he's already ripped. Wondering how he was able to achieve it in just a few days, she informs him that he's going to get discharged. But as he's about to leave his room, she asks for his number, because she can't resist his charm. We meet the S-rank hunter Beak, who is invited as a special guest in a TV show. The interviewer asks him about his daily routine, so he tells her that he's always training, because he doesn't want his combat skills to get rusty. He reveals that he used to work as a firefighter, so he knows how to respond to dangerous situations. Gina is watching the interview, but she realizes that she's already late, and Jinwoo tells her to be careful on her way to school. She notices he looks different, thinking it must be because of his training, and she's about to leave her school, but he gives her an umbrella, telling her to stay safe. After she leaves, He checks his daily quest, as he notes that he gained muscle mass, thinking it must be because his stats increase. He notes that he still hasn't distributed his ability points, thinking he needs more than just strength to defeat powerful monsters, so he decides to use them to improve his agility and perception. At that moment, he receives a call from the landlord, who tells him that his rent is due. So he promises to pay immediately. He knows that he has become stronger, so he thinks he'll be able to earn more money by raiding dungeons, but he notes that it's difficult to find a good job, because his rank is still at E. He thinks about undergoing a re-evaluation, thinking it will allow him to raise his rank, and earn more money, but it would attract too much attention, knowing his case is unusual, so he ultimately decides against it. He's surprised when he sees a high-paying job for E-rank hunters, so he rushes over to the location, and completes his daily quest. Along the way, he meets a hunter named Don Suk, who explains that his party only has 6 members, and they need 8 people to enter the C-rank dungeon, so they're hiring hunters to fill the slots, but he mentions that Jinwoo won't share the spoils, because he won't be fighting the monsters, but they will pay him a large commission for joining them. Jinwoo accepts the job, and Don Suk orders him to carry their luggage, but he wonders why the party has no healer, so Don Suk tells him that they're already used to fighting without one. He finds this strange, and he reads the contract, realizing that they won't be liable for anything that happens to him in the dungeon, but he signs it anyways. A D-ranked hunter named Eugen approaches him, revealing that he also accepted the job, and everyone is impressed with his equipment. Thinking he must be from a rich family, they prepare to enter the gate. As everyone notes that it looks enormous, but Jinwoo explains that the size of the gate doesn't matter, and the Hunter Association classifies it based on the amount of magic power it exudes. They enter the gate, and they realize that the dungeon is too dark, so the mage lightens up the area, allowing them to see what's inside. But Jinwoo notes that it reminds him of the temple, because it's pitch black, and there are no monsters blocking their path. As they head deep into the dungeon, they hear monsters approaching, so everyone prepares for battle. But they're surrounded by openings, so they panic, wondering where the monsters will come from. But Jinwoo observes his surroundings, and he warns them that the ants will attack from above, so they're able to respond on time. They're able to defeat the ants, and they start searching for magic gems, as Don Suk wonders how Jinwoo was able to predict where the ants would come from. He mentions that it was just a gut feeling, and the mage notes that the ants have bite marks, thinking they were attacked by a powerful monster. Eugen is happy that he was able to kill a monster, revealing that this is his first mission. So his father bought him expensive gear, but Jinwoo warns him to be cautious, because he can sense that something's wrong. At the White Tiger Guild, we see the hunters in the gym, when they notice an explosion, but they maintain their composure, because it happens all the time. Knowing their guild master is just training, we see that Beak blew a massive hole into a boulder, but he mentions that it isn't even a warm-up, ordering his subordinates to clean it up. We return to the dungeon, as Jinwoo continues to carry the luggage for the group, but he thinks that Don Suk's party is suspicious, because they have no healer despite their excellent teamwork. They see injured ants along the way, thinking the boss should be nearby, and as they proceed deeper into the dungeon, they reach an area surrounded by mana crystals, thinking they're going to be rich. Eugen reads Jinwoo's contract, and he explains that the crystals don't count as spoils, so Jinwoo must receive a portion of it. Don Suk agrees with him, but he reveals that the boss is guarding the crystals, and they know that the dungeon will close after it's defeated, so he suggests mining the crystals before they deal with it, knowing it's still sleeping, but Don Suk explains that they left their mining tools, so they need to leave the dungeon to get it. They leave Eugen and Jinwoo inside, and Don Suk orders Mage to block the path, so he uses his magic, causing an explosion which seals the entrance. Jinwoo realizes that they have been betrayed, as he recalls that Songchi warned him that the crime rate for dungeon raids is high, because there's no way to tell if a hunter has been murdered in a dungeon. Eugen blames himself for talking about the contract, but Jinwoo knows that Don Suk's party was planning to kill them from the very beginning. The spider approaches them, and Eugen promises to protect Jinwoo, who notes that the spider is stronger than the bosses he defeated so far. He believes that he's no match for it, but he recalls his encounter with the statue of God, knowing the spider is nothing compared to it, so he tells Eugen to stand back. As he prepares to fight the boss, Don Suk's companion wonders why they're using the spider to eliminate Jinwoo and Eugen, so he explains that he didn't want to risk waking it up. He thinks that it will go to sleep after it eats them, and he reveals that there's a small path above the cave, planning to use it to return, as he mentions that Jinwoo and Eugen are as good as dead. Eugen thinks that Jinwoo doesn't stand a chance, because he's just an E-rank hunter, but he refuses to back down, thinking he's strong enough to defeat it. He charges in, attacking with ridiculous speed, and Yujin is surprised to see this. But we cut to Gun, as he tells Jin Chul that he's exhausted because of his meetings, so Jin Chul invites him to a sparring match, thinking it will help him unwind. He accepts it, saying he's out of his prime, but as they start training, Jin Chul struggles to hit him, and he counters with a devastating blow, allowing him to win the match. Jin Chul thanks Gun for his guidance, saying he's amazing. Because he's incredibly strong for his age, he tells Jin Chul that his moves have improved, advising him not to neglect his training, because it will help him survive dangerous situations. We return to Jin Woo, as he tries to cut the spider's legs, but he realizes that its armor is too tough, and he notes that its attacks are deadly. Thinking it could kill him in one hit, he struggles against it, as Yujin wonders how he can move so fast, thinking he must have intentionally lowered his ranking by controlling his magic. But Yujin becomes afraid, because few hunters are capable of doing this, and they're usually psychopaths who take pleasure in killing. Jinwoo realizes that his fatigue is increasing, knowing it will cause his movements to slow down, so he thinks about using his dagger's special abilities to end the fight. He sees the spider's head, thinking it's the weak spot, so he charges in. But the spider spits acid, forcing him to retreat. He knows that he needs to close the distance, so he uses his dash skill, allowing him to move even faster. He attacks the spider's head, and it has no effect. But he refuses to give up, so he continues his assault, but his fatigue accumulates, causing him to slow down, and he crashes to the ground. The spider is about to strike the finishing blow, but he uses his full recovery, allowing him to dodge it, and he launches a surprise attack, stabbing the spider's eye. The dagger's ability activates, paralyzing the spider, and draining its health. As Jinwoo continues his relentless assault, it crashes to the ground, and the system mentions that the boss has been defeated. But Yujin can't believe his own eyes, thinking he was right about him, so he tells Jinwoo to relax, as he mines the crystals. But at that moment, Dan-suk's party arrives, realizing that the boss has been defeated. They think Yujin was the one who killed it, and Dan-suk tells him to eliminate Jinwoo, saying they will spare his life if he obeys them. But he refuses, preparing to fight them, so they start approaching him, and at that moment, Jinwoo receives an urgent quest, telling him to eliminate them. He's surprised to see this, realizing that the system is telling him to kill people, but they suddenly attacks him, blowing him away. As everyone thinks that Jinwoo is dead, but we see that he's still alive, and he recalls that he lives in a world where only the strong survive. Wondering how he forgot about this, he's about to lose consciousness, but he realizes that the system wants him to survive, so it's telling him to fight for his life. He gets back up, surprising everyone, as he realizes that he has to be strong, because the weak people will have everything taken from them. They call him the weakest hunter in the world, but he asks them if they're ready to face the consequence, as he unleashes an ominous aura. Dan-suk's companion approaches him, reminding him that he's just an E-rank hunter, but he suddenly kills the man, slicing his head off. Everyone is surprised to see this, wondering when he pulled out his weapon, and he notes that he just murdered someone. But he knows that he did it to save his own life. Dan-suk's party attacks him, but he manages to defend himself, slaughtering them as they try to kill him. They tries to blast him, but he suddenly disappears, and lands counterattack, taking him out in an instant. Dan-suk freaks out, realizing that Jinwoo was hiding his true powers, but he mentions that he's stronger than his companions. As he uses his skill to strengthen his body, he believes that Jinwoo relies on his speed, and he's using his dagger to deal damage, but he knows that it won't work against him, because his body is as hard as steel. He charges in, trying to avenge his companions, but Jinwoo smashes him against the ground. He realizes that he doesn't stand a chance, so he starts begging for his life, telling Jinwoo that he can have the crystals, but he mentions that Dan-suk tried to kill him 3 times, reminding him that no one will know what happens in the dungeon. Jinwoo slices his head off, allowing him to complete the urgent quest, but the dungeon starts collapsing, as the gate is about to close. They're able to escape in time, and they report that Dan-suk's party was killed during the raid. Jinwoo realizes that he received a reward for completing the urgent quest, and he acquires a skill called Murderous Intent, which weakens the enemies by causing them to panic. The official believes them, and she judges them based on their equipment, thinking Yujin was the one who defeated the boss, while Jinwoo did nothing to help, but Yujin thanks him for saving his life. But that's where this video ends. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.